Hello. We're good? Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm not sure my talk is wicked, but hopefully it's good. Actually, before we get started, I want to give a huge shout out to the Mantle team for throwing this event. Last year, we were really involved with them running Preditions, the precursor to this, and it took Jordan quite a bit of convincing to get us to relinquish control, but I'm kind of glad we did it. It's thriving, it's a lot better than it was last year, and I'm really appreciative of all the effort they put in to bring us all together again this year. So big round of applause for the Mantle team for doing this again. And if you notice me frantically clicking, looking here, and looking here all at once, it's because the clicker controls a different laptop, my notes are here, and I'm trying to do 9-dimensional chess, keep it all together. Okay, so let's get started. I'm Mohammad. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Gadget, the app development and hosting platform that many of you use to build and run Shopify apps. I'm also a husband and father to a baby toddler who is quite a handful. And as you can imagine, most of my time is spent between my two babies, the startup and the human one, and my wife. And if there's anything left, I spend it tinkering with AI. I use AI for virtually everything, personally, professionally, everything. On the personal front, it plans my meals. It packs our it creates our packing list when we're traveling, which is actually really complicated with a kid. Parenting advice, at this point, ChatGPT is basically raising my son. On the professional end, it's the first screen I go to anytime I'm opening any document, a marketing doc, a blog post, product requirements, it's the first thing I do. Talks, conference talks, you can take a guess at how much of this I actually wrote versus AI. And no, I did not hand draw a bunch of Ghibli illustrations for this talk, so that's a bit of a hint. And professionally, as the founder of a app development and hosting platform that's AI assisted, you can imagine I also spend a ton of my time looking at every tool, LLM provider, playing with everything, and trying to figure out like where's the space headed, who are my competitors, and what's everyone doing. So my entire life is AI, and that's why I am here to talk to you about the one topic that I'm qualified to talk about, and that's AI. And how it's disrupting how we work in the commerce space, and specifically how we as app developers and agencies work when we code. We're going to talk about denial, fear, anxiety, optimism, and all the other emotions we all feel every time a new tool or LLM provider comes out and scares the shit out of us because we're not sure if it's going to help us do our jobs 10 times easier or if it's going to take our jobs away. And we're also going to talk about how to adopt a much more cool-headed mindset that's less emotional when looking at a changing landscape so that you have a better shot at actually correctly identifying the opportunities and threats, and you're not just left seeing threats all the time, which is the impression I get from most developers I speak to. So let's get started on this talk that I've just built up to for 3 minutes. This is commerce. It's the space we all work in. It is seemingly simple, but actually quite complex and surprisingly multidimensional. It's actually many, many industries. I just picked 6 random ones under the hood, each with their own professions, tools, and processes. And because we get to play in this multifaceted area, we've had a front row seat to 2 years of AI disruption, wiping through different verticals and seeing exactly what it does. We've seen customer support that used to be outsourced by D2C brands to offshore firms essentially get gobbled up by AI in months. Lead gen is entirely AI assisted at this point. No one's doing it manually. And creative writing has gotten 100 times easier to the point where people like me can write decent conference talks in hours with AI. Hours. That's as much time as I spent on this. It's also coming to what we as developers do. Shopify itself releases new features, new Sidekick features, new MCP servers, and new AI products every day. It's not hard to imagine a near future where they ship something that lets a brand build out their own functions or a simple extension for themselves. In fact, they launched the AI theme builder, so that will probably change how a lot of agencies work. So in an environment like this, it's kind of easy to see why everyone gets a little bit more pessimistic, negative, and what I would call doomerist. You can kind of see that your world as developers hasn't been spared either. You know, initially it was autocomplete at your fingertips in a nice and delightful way in your favorite IDE, but then these pesky cloud-based dev platforms come along and they start bundling in frameworks and infrastructure and hosting and offering like no setup solutions that bring in developers that traditionally wouldn't be able to do this kind of work on their own, and so now you find yourself competing against more people. And then the prompt to app services like Bolt and Lovable show up, and they promise my mom that she can build the next big SaaS. And now you're competing against everyone. So, sorry, I've lost myself, and I'm trying to calm and coolly figure out exactly where I am. So many of these changes, when looked at through this like negative perspective, seemingly threaten to either completely change our jobs or take them away. But that's a byproduct of our negativity. I vehemently disagree with this take. Vehemently was a word I could not prompt out of my script, and so I'm running with it. This is AI doomerism. It's zooming in and choosing to look at the half-empty glass of a half-full glass, and then assuming that that negative picture is in the entire picture. I believe that the truth is actually a lot more positive, and that if you look closely and take a much more nuanced view, you'll actually find that for every threat and challenge that AI has presented you with, it's also given you 2 new opportunities that wouldn't have existed before. To prove my point, let's walk through the same set of things we just talked about, but let's take a slightly more positive mindset and let's look for some of those opportunities in some of the things that have changed in our ecosystem. Let's go back all the way to 2023, I think, which was yesterday, but seems like a lifetime ago, when Cursor came out. And what did they do? They came out with the most brilliant innovation. Before I write the next line of code, it's there staring at me. It predicts what I'm about to do, finds it for me, usually the right snippet, puts it at my fingertip in the IDE. Why was that so revolutionary? Because developers spend endless hours staring at their IDEs, not remembering how to do something they used to know how to do, reflexively opening Google Chrome, opening a tab, searching, clicking on 3 links, scanning the page for a code snippet, copying it, pasting it back into the IDE, running it, seeing what happens, and then starting to debug. Endless hours, like many hours per week, many hundreds of thousands of hours per month, if not millions, doing this monkey work of copy-pasting stuff back and forth into your IDE. And so Cursor comes out with this really simple innovation. It's right there. You don't have to go find it. And the world changes in an enormous way. Like the change was simple, but the impact was profound. A very, very large percentage of all the developers that I've interacted with got much, 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 much more productive. They can finish the same projects faster. They can build more features in the same amount of time for the same project. They can build more ambitious features that were slightly out of reach for them. Like, all of this has happened. This is actually the most notable change that has come out of AI-assisted development. Not all the scary stuff that everyone keeps talking about, but the fact that every single developer is pumping out way more software and everyone is much more productive. And there's more money being made somewhere in that chain. Somebody's making it. We work with a lot of agencies at Gadget. We've seen this and heard this like from day one. Anytime we make anything easier, whether it's through our platform, our infrastructure, or our AI, the answer is always the same from agencies. All that happens is the brand send them more work or give them more requirements. The budget is always the same. The brand will always use every penny they have to build software to make their lives better. They just get more things for the same amount of money. Sorry, this is probably getting annoying for you all, but I am doing my best to stay on top of what is what. Now, in all of these changes, some people do get left behind, but there are kind of the developers that refuse to touch AI because they want to hand roll everything, or they're too jaded or skeptical or too tired to want to relearn and retry every new tool that shows up. My argument would be that AI didn't leave these developers behind. They chose to leave themselves behind. And if they were still engaged and energized enough to adapt and learn any of the new tools that were available to them, they too would have thrived in this ecosystem like everybody else. This trend, in my opinion, will continue for a very, very long time. The need for software has never been limited by the lack of ideas. We've always been constrained by time and money. We've been trained to think that every piece of software is this incredibly expensive thing to build and run, and so we reserve our software ideas for only the problems that we perceive to be meaningful enough to be worthy of the cost of development. But if you bring that cost down, people will just send you more ideas. If you go and tell any brand that you will work for them for free as a developer, there will not be 1 second of your life where they're not giving you a problem to work on. They have problems. You will be employed 24/7. The reason they don't give them to you today is because the ROI equation on cost versus benefit is busted, and AI is changing that ROI equation very, very quickly. So the net result of what we're going to see is things get 100 times faster and cheaper. People want 100 times more things. We all build 100 times more things. And the best evidence of this is actually from the ecosystem we all work in. There's a really great anecdote from one of their board members who happens to also be our board member, where when Shopify actually reached out to Bessemer to raise their first round, the VC community's concern was that at that time there were 40,000 online stores, only 40,000. They were all giant enterprise brands, and their argument was, okay, cool, you're going to spend 5 years building this thing, and at best you're going to steal a percentage of the 40,000 people that are already using Magento, Demandware, whatever the other things were at that time. Toby's argument was a counter to that. It was, no, actually only 40,000 people are doing it because it costs $1 million to $1.5 million worth of software development to go build payments, checkout, shipping, product, storefront, and do it all by hand as a developer. And in the end, he was right. Made it easier, more people did it. Same thing is true in software development. In fact, I would argue it's more true. I think you'll be more surprised to find a random person on the street that can give you 3 random app ideas they want built tomorrow versus 3 random businesses. And I'm kind of classifying the first group as like personal problems or like internal tools versus like SaaS. You can argue that Cursor's arrival came with some negatives, that it took away jobs from a lot of young developers, and I would agree with that. I think it's a lot harder if you're a developer in school to try to get a job right away at a bigger tech firm, especially like any of the bigger players out there. But it's also created a lot of opportunities, even for them. First of all, this is the best time to start a company ever. Every single industry, every single incumbent is being challenged left and right, and so if there are opportunities that are going to work, this is the time to start them. So if you're a developer that's 20 years old today, you're off to a much better start if you have an interest in being an entrepreneur than when I started in 2007 during a crash. Aside from that, there's also actual jobs being created. Prompt engineering is a real thing. It's a profession, it's got its tools, it's got a discipline, it pays really, really well. Robotics has picked up a lot again because people are super excited about how we can finally combine the hardware that we now know how to build with AI software and do really interesting things. And so while some jobs have disappeared, others have appeared as well. And I think this is kind of the point. All in all, when you look at things from this nuanced lens, the scorecard's wildly different. We've opened up just as many doors, if not more, as we've closed, even on ourselves as developers. Going back to our timeline, let's look at like the cloud computing platforms we talked about, the Replets and the Gadgets that came in and made it so that the less technical developers and the pseudo developers could build full stack apps as well. That negative view could be true somewhat, but I think the reality is a lot more nuanced. First of all, oops, I have lost a slide. That's my bad. First of all, anyone can use these tools. So if someone's running circles around you by using a tool, feel free to use it yourself. So there is no advantage to someone who is competing against you with a different tool than yourself. You're just choosing not to use the same thing. Secondly, I would argue that a lot of the use cases that at least I have seen with Gadget, with citizen developers and pseudo-technicals, are the type of things that agencies and app developers have been saying no to. In fact, we have a couple of really good examples of them that we've seen recently that I would love to share. We had a merchant, I don't have a screenshot of his app, but he had a simple problem. He needed a way to upload spreadsheets that showed the torque and performance of the engine parts he was selling and upload them to his product page. So he wanted a spreadsheet, load it up, generate a graph, put the graph in an extension, show the extension on a product display page. Went to a Liquid web developer, what he called his dev, and his Liquid web developer told him that it was out of his skill sets and he couldn't do it. And the merchant ended up doing it for about $300 worth of AI prompts. And it works, by the way. Like, I've seen it. He has deployed the app onto a live store. Now, could that developer have done the job? Almost certainly. There's no way a Liquid developer, whatever that means, of any level of experience is less likely to succeed with any development tool than a non-developer. That's still more developer than the non-developer. So that person was just behind the game on what the possibilities were with the tools that were available to them. The answer was yes, they could have built it. Similarly, this app, this is actually from my wife's store. She runs a Shopify Plus store. She needed a way to automate the registration of all of her influencers because she wants to track their orders because they offer their influencers promotions, but often they get taken advantage of. And so they just want some alerting system that lets them know what the influencers are up to in terms of purchases. She went to her agency because they have an agency. They got a quote for 3 weeks at work, and she said no. And the reason she said no was this was not 3 weeks of work's worth of money for her in terms of pain. But then her and I spoke to each other on the weekend, and she asked me about it, and I told her what prompts I thought would work in Gadget, and she went off, and 15 hours later, and a lot of questions to me throughout the day, she built the app. It works. She didn't need a developer. It's deployed against a live Shopify Plus store that sells millions of dollars, like a real business. The cases for citizen devs actually like finishing meaningfully complicated apps are still far in between, but they're starting to show up more and more often. But the point I want to make is in both of these examples, the opportunity was actually a developer's to take. They passed on it, and then it went to a citizen developer who decided to take it themselves. So if you're finding yourself not catching the 10x growth in the market that I'm promising is occurring, it could possibly be that you're saying no to it. And I believe that with agencies and app developers, from what I've seen, often they're saying no to it because of process. Because the processes they adopt for selling, onboarding, and getting aligned with users on requirements are cumbersome enough in their own sense that the project just can't be faster and cheaper than a certain price point to make sense. And I think that's a real risk to agencies, those legacy processes that they're kind of allegiant to. We'll talk about those in a second. Before I do that, let's go back to our timeline and finish it off. Lovable and Bolt show up. These prompt-to-app services that go from 0 to $50 million in revenue in 4 months, promising you can build websites, web apps, CMSs, whatever you have in mind. And again, you can take the view that these tools are taking use cases and opportunities away from you, but zoom in, it's a lot more nuanced. First of all, they're not great at everything they claim to be great at. They're great at front ends, not back ends. They're great at static websites or websites with light CMSs, not web apps. You know, you got to actually try the tool to be able to distinguish the marketing from the value. Secondly, most of the work that they're doing is still actually being sent to agencies. I know of numerous agencies who are now getting more than 50% of their business from Bolt citizen developers who get far enough, have their vision on screen, they know what they want, but it's not working exactly as they want, and they farm it out to a Bolt agency who then picks it up and finishes it off for them. So it's actually created a lot of work for the agencies that orbit Bolt. And then finally, it's given everyone, app developers, agencies, freelancers, a much, much better and faster way of working day to day. Like, it doesn't make sense to get your client on 4 calls to then only send them a document with bullet points on the Friday when there's a tool that lets them see the UI right on the call live as you and them work through a set of prompts. So Bolt's also given us like especially the agencies that I think often struggle with like aligning on visual requirements, a fantastic tool to 10x the speed of that, lower the cost, and actually get really aligned with a user. Because if you can see the UI and they say yes to it, you're probably on the same page. So the arrival of these have actually been really, really good for developers, in my opinion. And in fact, again, developers can choose to use them too if they want. Finally, just that point on agencies adapting, I think just quickly again, my own observation has been that some of the bigger agencies especially are more used to running a process that they've been running to for years. And I think when an industry is so completely upended, you have to reevaluate a lot of those processes. Processes are kind of put in place to mitigate costs and risks. Historically, software development has been the most expensive profession on the planet for a very, very long time. But when there's a technology that's driving that cost down, the processes that were there to protect us from losing crazy amounts of money by making silly mistakes need to be revisited. It doesn't make sense. Not all projects need PMs anymore. Not every project needs a requirements document with bullet points for alignment. Bolt is good enough for many of them. And so people need to kind of open themselves up to actually reevaluating these things. And so I leave you all with my last bit of advice, which is a e-commerce developer survival toolkit. And in this toolkit, you will not find any tools or LLMs that I recommend you use. You won't find any processes that I think you should drop, mostly because I think every single one of those answers will change 3 more times by the end of the year as new providers come out and everything keeps changing over and over again. And so instead, I give you 3 mindset shifts to adopt, because if you adopt them, regardless of what changes over the next months and years, you'll be open and curious enough about the positive possibilities that you'll actually see them. The first would be to be a techno-optimist. Assume correctly, and if you need proof, feel free to go through the history of tech, that any time a big technology that is enormously disruptive has come out, life has gotten better for almost everybody, including the people whose jobs were displaced by that technology. Often, more jobs were created than taken away. Often, markets actually got better than they shrunk. And often, these realities take a long time to play out. You go play out that Toby story about the 40,000 brands, I bet you like day 1, a developer looking at that story playing out would be like, oh, okay, well, that's 40,000 less projects for developers that's going to this like low-code, no-code platform thingy called Shopify. 10 years later, there's hundreds of you at an event, every event they throw, building lots of apps that you could not have foreseen building 10 years earlier on Demandware and Magento for the 40,000 stores. So the future is not always obvious. Sometimes it looks like it's going in a direction and then suddenly it changes. But if you look at history, disruptive technology has almost always been incredibly positive. Second piece of advice is reevaluate everything over and over. Like I said earlier, a lot of processes were put in place to mitigate the crazy high costs of software developers. Reevaluate them over and over. New tools come out, go look at them again. Right now, things are just changing too fast to say, hey, I considered changing this process once 2 years ago. When you see new realities, you should just go back and reevaluate everything. And then finally, and arguably most importantly, because this is actually the thing that gives you the space in your head to even be open to good possibilities, be open and curious. Be open to the reality that some of the work you're doing is going to go away, but there's probably going to be new possibilities for you that were not possible before. Ask yourself, hey, in the same way that these other people are now able to do certain things that I'm able to do, what has this technology done for me? What can I do that I wasn't able to do yesterday? Can I build more? Can I build faster? Can I be more ambitious and do that really hard technical thing that I'm convinced I can't do? The answer is almost certainly yes, and AI has made it all possible, but that negativity gets in the way of even trying. And so being open and curious to me is like the core ingredient to kind of combat, survive, and thrive in this environment and not play a defensive game where you're constantly anxious. And so with that, I leave you all with a great big welcome to our glorious AI-assisted future, where we will all be building 10 to 100 times more things than we're building today and making 10 to 100 times more money than we make today. Thank you.
Test, test.